Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Israel Hawkins. Well, in the news today, both the United States and Russia are making moves to secure oil in the Middle East. That area, of course, is very rich with oil, and both of those superpowers are staking their claims. Right. Well, we'll cover those details as well as the latest from Lebanon, still trying to recover from that deadly explosion that we saw. They're seeing more protests along with some resignations from government officials. Right. Also, the daily death toll from the coronavirus is reaching new records. And finally, we'll talk about a historic deal in the Middle East. But Katan, first, let's jump into our first report. Well, they became infamous in the Holy Scriptures as the 8th plague, and in some regions of the world still plaguing mankind today. But some say they are or can be a great source of protein in modern times. What are we talking about? Grasshoppers. And Hargo Food Tech, a company located in the Golan Heights, is making strides to put locusts on the menu. Now, according to Dor Tamir, founder of and CEO of the Israeli firm, there are approximately 2.5 billion people consuming insects as part of their diet. But more people eat grasshoppers than any other insect. And just as a side note, one of the things that we've heard Yeshua Hawkins teaching is that there are insects that are considered clean and acceptable, but then there are insects that are not. So, and grasshoppers is one of those clean and acceptable insects.
That's right, and we'll find out why here in a minute. While locusts do have a habit of destroying crops, some Yemenite Jews view these little hopping creatures as an important source of edible nutrients rather than pests. Mr. Tanir says grasshoppers probably provide the best nutritional content of any other creature in the world. The animal, as it is, with no processing, contains over 70% protein.
Wow. Well, Hargo Food Tech has neatly stacked rows of mesh cages in a climate-controlled building where they serve their grasshoppers a nutritious diet of wheatgrass during their 3-month life cycle. Then, when they have reached maturity, the locusts are cooled, killed, and baked. But will they get a kosher seal of approval? Well, Mr. Tamir thinks so, saying the Israeli rabbinate is now considering bringing back that old tradition, and we expect in the next couple of months to get an approval. And for the first time after 2,000 years, grasshoppers will be back, he said.
I have a feeling they didn't worry about a kosher symbol back in the days of their wandering in the wilderness.
Right.
Well, while the Holy Land could soon be seeing grasshoppers in their markets, George's company is seeking a broader audience to sell to, but not without some difficulties, he admits. It's really hard to overcome the yuck factor, so the first step we do is actually process the grasshoppers into powder. We just dry them and mill them, and we embed them into a wide range of food applications.
Well, the mission of Hargo Food Tech is not just to provide the world with a healthier and sustainable source of protein, but also to be the first ones to grow grasshoppers commercially. And as their operation continues to pick up speed and grow, the likelihood of meeting that goal is getting closer each day.
Interesting. We now turn to more tensions in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. France is building up a military presence there after Turkey started its oil and gas operation in the disputed waters. Turkey's move has enraged the islands of Greece and Cyprus, while France-Turkey relations are also strained. Paris says they are just in the area to monitor the situation.
Well, President Macron sounded the alarm with his tweet, writing, "The Eastern Mediterranean is worrying. Turkey's unilateral decisions on oil exploration are causing tensions. These must stop in order for a peaceful dialogue between neighboring and NATO allies to take place."
But Macron has made a move that to Turkey might seem more offensive than observatory. France has confirmed they will send 2 Rafale fighter jets and the Lafayette, which is a naval frigate, to the area, a move that Greek Prime Minister welcomes. He also tweeted, I thank President Macron for his solidarity. Emmanuel Macron is a true friend of Greece, but also a fervent defender of European values and international law.
Well, on the surface, the Greek Prime Minister is saying this is an act of solidarity by France. It is not hard to see. Macron and his country have more at stake. In recent months, Macron has warned Turkey they must not continue to move into Libya, saying, "We have seen Turkish warships delivering Syrian mercenaries to Libyan soil. This is a serious and explicit infringement of what we agreed upon in Berlin. I must reiterate, the prerequisite for any political solution in Libya is the cancellation of this document."
And just last month, President Macron was calling for sanctions against Turkey over the same reported violations in the eastern Mediterranean. The European Union is now taking notice since Turkey has a new seismic survey vessel in the area. The European Commission Foreign Affairs spokesperson Peter Stano commented, "The latest developments are extremely worrying. What is needed to be done is to engage in solving all the open issues in line with the principles of good neighborly relations, international law, and positive engagement."
Well, with Big Brother France now flexing its military might in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, Greece seems to feel emboldened. Now, the country has placed its military on high alert and has called all naval and air force personnel back from their holidays. Now, on the flip side, Turkey asserts it will protect its rights, ties, and all interests in the coastal waters. Turkey's president has also accused President Macron of provoking the regional players like Greece and Cyprus into taking harmful steps. So the concern now is that France might have just escalated the situation instead of diffusing it.
Interesting. Well, as the world continues to fight over oil, Russia is making some moves to try to secure some of the Libyan oil with the help of the Libyan warlord Khalifa Haftar. Well, take a look at this video courtesy of Al Jazeera News that explains some of Russia's latest moves and how the U.S. is handling it.
Well, Haftar has always had the support of Russia, France, and the United Arab Emirates. But as Russia steps up its reach around the Mediterranean and Africa, it's increased tensions between Moscow and Washington. The United States military has taken the extraordinary steps of cataloguing and releasing satellite imagery. In May, 14 MiG-29s and several Su-24s were flown from Russia to Syria before being flown to Libya. It's thought they're being piloted by private military contractors. Russian private military group Wagner, which has close links to the Kremlin, has about 2,000 personnel in country and is said to be supported by other foreign militias. The Wagner Group has enabled Haftar to seize control of the country's biggest oil field, which produces 300,000 barrels a day. And Russia's control of oil fields and ports means the UN-recognized government in Tripoli can't pay its civil servants. Russian private military contractors are active in 16 African nations. That's according to AFRICOM. Washington has threatened to sanction Haftar, who is a US citizen and a former CIA asset. Haftar owns property worth more than $500,000 in the United States. So, what is Russia's end game? And caught in the middle of all of this are the Libyan people themselves. Let's bring in Francis Giles in Tunis. He's a North Africa analyst and former Financial Times correspondent. Francis, this conflict is turning into a real mess, isn't it? I mean, Russia is printing money for Haftar's political base in the east, and having lost the battle for Tripoli, Russia now seems to be going after the main economic resource, which is, of course, oil.
Well, I think that, in a way, all this is sadly predictable, because when the French took the decision to cheerlead Britain and America into Libya, their intent was to protect the inhabitants of Benghazi, but it quickly turned into an operation to oust Gaddafi. The problem about that is that nobody had thought through the consequences of ousting or murdering the Libyan leader. And so other countries got involved, be it was France, Britain, America, Gulf countries, whatnot. Mercenaries made their appearance very quickly. And then we got this division over the last few years between eastern and western Libya. And so inevitably, like in Syria, if you will, the more the conflict goes on, it turns from a local conflict into an international conflict where every player has their own agenda. And now the Russians, who've used the Syrian crisis very adroitly to come back into the Middle East or to reinforce their position in the Middle East, which had been weakened after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, the Russians are coming back into Libya.
So, Francis, you mentioned the point about mercenaries in your previous answer. We know that Russia is providing and using private military contractors in Libya from the Wagner Group. We understand the group is active in around 16 African countries. How's it being funded, do you think?
Well, the Russians are very good at keeping this kind of thing secret. They're not the only one who use proxies, but the Russians have a powerful state, a powerful military, and a leader determined to get back into the Middle East. So it could be funded from indirectly from the state budget. It could be funded by one of the oligarchs. You know, there are any number of ways you could fund this. And one must remember, of course, that the funding will not go through any kind of traceable Western banking system. So exactly like, you know, with Iran, and there have been other cases, tracing the money is, of course, the way to find out. But before you trace the money, that's virtually impossible.
So let's just talk quickly, if we can, Francis, about some of the key players. Turkey supports the UN-backed government, and now it has its hands on rights to explore for oil and gas off the coast. That's caused a spat because this is disputed territory claimed by Greece.
Well, indeed. Well, the Turks have played their cards, and, you know, whatever one thinks of Turkey, they've played their cards well, because what they've done is that they signed with the government in Tripoli at the beginning of the year a new treaty which redefines the boundaries at sea which are accepted internationally, and they're trying to push their claims on waters closer to Cyprus and to different Greek islands off the coast of Asia Minor. And they're doing this in Tripoli as well. The advantage for their point of view is that it disrupts current oil drilling operations. And even if in 2 or 3 years' time, whichever international authority declares that what Turkey is trying to push is invalid, it has the advantage of disrupting current oil search for oil. That said, this doesn't matter for Europe because Europe doesn't need the gas. It's particularly gas rather than oil. Europe doesn't need the gas. But I think that from the beginning, there's been a suspicion, and Colonel Gaddafi had said very well before he died that what people were after was the oil and gas of Libya. And they are indeed after Algeria and Angola and Nigeria. They're very, very major reserves, many of which are not even explored properly. So clearly, the Russians are interested because that gives them extra leverage in the Middle East if they can control some of that oil and some of that gas.
Well, as we just heard there, once again, it's about the oil in that region. Now, that was Russia's latest moves. For more on what the U.S., their steps they're taking in their own securing of the oil in Syria, we now turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has those latest details on just what the U.S. is doing. Larry, what are those details?
The national and individual lust for the large sums of wealth being produced and derived from the selfish misuse of the planet's resources has taken many lives to date. Lust produces war, and the lust for wealth is insatiable. And so much as lust is never satisfied, the grave is neither. America is apparently looking to distance itself, however, from some of the dirty work of petrol maintenance and acquisition by hiring out and training various mercenary and proxy groups to handle its lightweight in places like Syria. These are plans which the current U.S. administration has not sought to hide. The objective openly communicated by the U.S. is to increase its troop presence in Syria with the ultimate intent of creating a 2,200-man oil field guard. In answering for its intentions, the U.S. says its aim is to prevent groups like ISIS from securing the fields. But there's great skepticism concerning that claim, since America is also preventing the Syrian government from accessing those fields as well. In fact, in response to the plan, Damascus released a statement condemning the U.S.'s intentions in the strongest terms and outright referred to its objective as an act of theft. Russia and Turkey have also condemned the plan, the execution of which keeps America in Syria in a fight which analysts see as continuous and ongoing. The time frame might have been off, but the framework itself seems to be holding true. Former General Wesley Clark's leaked information concerning a U.S. plan to topple several countries in 5 years makes one wonder about the sudden events and uprisings in Lebanon. The country recently experienced 2 large-scale and controversial explosions, and quickly following that was political unrest seeking to overthrow the government. Proceeding from that, after a short effort on behalf of the Lebanese government to keep the country under control, the prime minister of the nation resigned, along with his entire cabinet. Many in the U.S. and across the globe are grappling with cabin fever due to restrictions enacted to try and stem the plague of the coronavirus, but nothing has truly been successful at stopping the affliction so far, and in the U.S. as well, infection rates and the death toll continues to mount. America is reeling after 1,500 of its immuno-compromised citizens succumbed to the plague in just one day this week, which are numbers which the U.S. hasn't seen for a short while. The nation's leading authority in the crisis, Dr. Anthony Fauci, is reportedly not optimistic concerning a peak in either infection or death rates, and is said to be disappointed with the nation's progress against the malady. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. In the midst of everything that's taking place with the nations warring over, territory and oil and things of that nature, we still have an increase, a steady increase of the number of COVID-19 deaths that is taking place, not just in the United States, but also throughout many countries throughout the world. Well, Israel and the United Arab Emirates have entered a historic deal to normalize diplomatic relations. President Trump said regarding the agreement that this was a breakthrough that would advance peace in the Middle East region. The UAE is only the 3rd Arab nation to normalize ties with Israel, the first 2 being Egypt and Jordan. Part of this deal is tied to relations with Iran because tensions with a lot of Arab nations in the Gulf are high, and the hope is that maybe other Arab nations will work out a deal.
Well, President Trump calls this a historic Middle East agreement. The leader of the UAE calls it a roadmap. Well, why is the UAE leader presenting it differently than Israel and the United States? Well, because the question is, how do you sell this idea to other Arab nations, since prior interactions have not been so great with Israel, and because of that, other Arab nations have voiced their frustrations over the deal with President Erdogan of Turkey, even threatening to remove ambassadors and cutting off relations with the UAE. Well, Iran has called the deal idiotic, and even Hamas and Islamic Jihad rejected angrily to this, or actually reacted angrily to this new deal.
That's right. Well, under this agreement, of course, the results of discussions between, like we said, Israel, the United States, and the UAE. Israel will stop annexation of the West Bank, which has been one of the things that people in the West Bank and the Palestinians have desired for a very, very long period of time. Delegations of the 3 parties will meet in the coming weeks to sign the deal. And in the meantime, Israel and the U.S. has successfully tested a ballistic missile capable of shooting down an incoming nuclear warhead, according to defense officials. Now, even though Israel and the UAE have conducted joint military exercises, seeing as both countries see Iran as a threat, to some, this agreement isn't seen as a surprise. In fact, they expect other Arab nations to soon do the same.
Well, regarding the latest test of Israel's Arrow 2 air defense system, the test was to shoot down a simulated long-range missile high above the Mediterranean Sea, according to the U.S. and Israeli defense officials. Now, the Arrow 2 air defense system has been online in Israel since 2017, which is an upgraded version of its designed by Israel Aerospace Industries and Boeing. Now, this system is part of Israel's multi-layered rocket and missile defense system designed to take down short, medium, and long-range rockets and missiles primarily from the Gaza Strip, Lebanon, and, of course, Iran.
Now, the Iron Dome, which we've heard a lot about in the past, which is another missile defense system, is still in use along with Israel's border with Gaza to take out rockets fired from the Gaza Strip. Along with that, the David's Sling missile defense system, developed by Raytheon and Israel's Rafael Advanced Defense System, is along Israel's northern borders with Lebanon and Syria, designed to take down medium-range rockets and missiles. It was activated back in 2018 to counter 2 missiles over the Golan Heights in Syria during that country's civil war.
Well, according to John Huddy, an RT correspondent who witnessed many of the missile defense systems in action, he mentioned that he actually got to see the missile defense systems up close and said that along with Syria and threats from Iranian proxies in Syria, Hezbollah, and Lebanon, has an estimated, or they actually have an estimated of 130 to 150,000 rockets aimed at Israel, according to the Israeli defense officials.
Wow, that's a lot. Well, according to U.S. and Israeli officials, these defense systems, as expensive as they are, close to $1 billion, are necessary for Israeli defense. An Israeli prime minister in a statement said, "We have proven again the state of Israel possesses defensive and offensive capabilities that are among the strongest and most advanced in the world. I'd like to express deep appreciation to our U.S. ally for jointly advancing our security. Our enemies and those who seek our ill should know that the state of Israel is prepared for any threat."
Well, just as a closing note, along with the Arrow 2 missile defense system, the U.S. and Israel also successfully tested the Arrow 3 missile defense system in Alaska, designed to shoot down an intercontinental ballistic missile outside the Earth's atmosphere.
Oh, that's crazy. That is, it just seems like we're not moving any closer to the steps. I mean, we had this historic, agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, but then at the same time, there's this test of the, missile defense system, which, that says to the enemies of Israel that, hey, listen, if you desire to pick a fight with us, we have something to fight back with.
Right. No steps towards peace, but definitely steps being taken to build up the military forces, secure borders, make it harder for anyone to attack certain countries.
That's right. Well, locusts are on the menu for some, but disease, war, and death seems to be on the menu for a great many of mankind. Well, despite mankind's great technological advances in weaponry, like we just said, they still haven't brought peace through force, not in 6,000 years. Well, if you've had your fill of man's way, the opportunity for you to partake of the food which actually gives life is available for you, served up fresh daily at the House of Yahweh. To find out more information about the House of Yahweh and what you can do to protect yourself and to prepare for the upcoming wars that are going to be taking place, along with the other 6 plagues, as Yeshua Hawkins has been speaking about for a long time now, contact the House of Yahweh, and when you contact them, don't forget to ask for your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
Well, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YeshuaHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, you can check out the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com. And just one side note on the websites here, Katan, Yeshua Hawkins writes blog posts there, many articles, even outside of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletters. You can find those by going to the YeshuaHawkins.com or Yahweh'sBranch.com, and they're very pertinent to today's news stories that we're covering, and they present a lot of solutions to the problems that mankind faces.
Absolutely correct. Well, don't go anywhere. Get your pencil, some paper, and of course your Holy Scriptures, because up next for some great information is Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.